why not do a webinar on something a lot of our clients are interested in? So thank you to Colleen for organizing all this and inviting you all and setting everything up. So I really appreciate that. But welcome everybody. I'm excited to go through this topic. It's been interesting putting this together for you all. I'm going to share my deck here, as one does during a webinar. So, you know, I think from my perspective, you know, I'm Ben. I'm partner at Pilot, director of SEO. Been doing SEO for 12 years. Have much less experience in optimizing for AI, but I'm not alone. That's pretty much everybody in the world. It wasn't a thing until about 6 or 8 months ago. And I'm in Chicago. I know a lot of people joining today are local to Chicago, but people from all over I think are attending. So glad you're here, and I hope you learn a lot today. So today we're going to be covering, you know, first, why do we care? Why is it important to optimize for AI search? I'm going to share some statistics on that. Talk a little bit about what we're seeing so far with AI's impact on website traffic, and then kind of get into the nitty gritty. How do you optimize for AI search? That'll be the bulk of the discussion today, the webinar, and then go over how you can kind of see how your website's performing. So have a few examples there, so you can get a sense for, you know, are we showing up in these LLMs? How are we doing in Google AI overviews? That way you have some tools to check that sort of stuff out for yourself. And then at the end, we're going to have just a couple future technology I want you to keep what you could keep on your radar. I think, you know, all this is new. You know, ChatGPT I think was released at the very end of 2023. So this is going to be an evolving game we're all playing in. So I want to share a couple of things that are on my radar, maybe things to look out for coming ahead. And then we'll end with a Q&A. We should have 10 or 15 minutes to go through people's questions. So please, if you have a question, pop in the chat. Colleen's going to organize them all, and we can have hopefully a good, engaging discussion when we get to the end. So first, why do we care? And I have to say, you know, meeting with clients, have the past 2 months especially, almost every meeting, it seems like someone asks me about optimizing for AI. It's just been so prevalent. So I think this webinar is good timing for that, because it seems like it's really on everyone's radar. And for good reason. You know, AI adoption, it's growing really quickly. I don't think that'll surprise anybody. But I tried to find the latest statistics. These are from March of this year. 52% of US adults use AI like ChatGPT or Claude. 34% use it at least once a day. And this one was kind of shocking to me. 67% of organizations worldwide have adopted some sort of large language model to support their operations. So they're very, very prevalent, and you could imagine they're just going to be even more so as the adoption increases. And I think, you know, as we see traffic trends, I wanted to share what we're seeing in the back end of analytics. How much traffic are websites getting from AI? I have a few charts. They all look very similar, just different numbers. You can kind of see this growth curve. So this website, a year ago, July 2024, they were basically at 0 visitors a month. Fast forward to July 2025, and they were nearing 1,000. I think that number is actually about 950. So that's crazy growth. It's a very small percentage of this website's traffic, but you know, it's growing fast nonetheless. This one here was about 20 users last July. It hit about 450 last month. This example, again, around 20 and hit about 220. I mean, that's 11 times growth in 1 year. So if you extrapolate that, if the growth trend continues, I mean, 11 times 200 is 2,200. So it could grow really fast. It probably will peak out eventually. I would guess in the next 6 months or so, maybe a year, we'll see these start to flatten off a little bit. But nonetheless, it is a really fast-growing segment of website traffic. On the flip side, I think a lot of people have questions about how are these AI overviews, how is use of LLMs like impacting our marketing efforts? So just a few statistics about that. One is just declining click-through rates across the board. So Ahrefs, really respected industry platform, published a study in March 2025. So this is looking at the expected click-through rate on a position on a #1 ranking. So they're expecting the click-through rate would be 40% on a #1 ranking. The actual recorded click-through rate was 14 points lower at 26%, which is a 34.5% drop in click-through rate. So that's what Ahrefs is seeing. There's a pretty big drop in a click-through rate on the #1 result. Pew Research, I like this study because, you know, us marketers, we do a lot of our own research. I'm always skeptical of the design of them because we're marketers, we're not researchers. Pew, you know, they're like the gold standard in research. So I found this one really interesting. They're looking at how often do the AI summaries get clicked on in a Google search. They analyzed almost 70,000 searches from 900 adults. And what they found was only 1% of the time someone clicked on an AI, a link in the AI overview. And then 8% of the time they clicked on link at all. And then 26% of the time they quit browsing. So, you know, you can imagine you do a Google search, it answers your question, you know, you put your phone back in your pocket. 32% of the time they search something else, and 34% of the time they left and went to a different site. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Versus without an AI summary, you can see the click rate is almost double at 15%, whereas the rest of the statistics are pretty similar. So some data there. Here's some data from Search Console. So read a lot of studies about how Google search use is increasing and kind of bearing that out a little bit. This is year over year, the past 28 days versus the same period last year for 3 websites. So the first site, you can see 71,000 clicks this year, 110,000 last year. So they're seeing a drop in traffic, which is what a lot of marketers are talking about. However, you look at the impressions, they're up significantly. They're up 45%, 8.5 million versus 5.8 million. And then we see here the click-through rate is down almost 60%. But our average position is relatively the same, 18 point something and change. So I think, you know, that's an example. This first site is e-commerce. This next site, actually, I'm sorry, this first site is like an informational blog. So a lot of their queries are informational, which is probably why they have such a big hit in their click-through rate, because you can imagine informational queries. So someone just asking in Google a question, you know, like, can I transplant a false indigo? That one came to mind because I Googled it yesterday. That sort of thing, you almost always see an AI overview. So your click-through rates for those types of queries are going to be way more impacted than other types of searches. This next site is the e-commerce example. 59,000 clicks versus 66,000 last year. The impressions are up 44%, almost 4 million versus 2.75 last year. And the click-through rate here is down 38%, which is still a big drop, but it's not as dramatic as the 58%. And this is about what the Ahrefs study found was with their 35%. And this last example is a healthcare example. I think this one's interesting. The total clicks were actually doing better than last year, but their impressions are up 77%. So they're pretty close to doubled. Their click-through rate still dropped 36%. Their average position is actually a lot better though. So you can see it's, you know, about 30% better than last year, which is probably why they're getting more traffic overall. So you can still increase in traffic in this, you know, environment. It just, it's a lot of work and effort. Okay, so going beyond the data, how do we optimize for this stuff? How do we get into AI overviews? How do you show up in ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever the LLM people are using? First, I want to start with, the AI on the Google side. Google's been baking in different types of machine learning and AI into their algorithm since 2013. The first one was Hummingbird. That was like the most basic one. They were trying to improve semantic search. Basically, that helped them understand keywords and synonyms and and sentences over just keywords. That's when exact match SEO kind of died out, was 2013. So, which was a long time ago. Some people still do it that way. RankBrain was the first time Google introduced machine learning and AI directly into the algorithm. They were getting a lot of novel first-time searches, and that was their approach. I think that's when voice search became more common. Asking, "Okay, Google," yada yada yada, sort of stuff. BERT was in 2019. That was a natural language processing. Natural language processing is a big part of modern LLMs. That was the first time Google introduced that sort of technology into the search algorithm. And then MUM is the most advanced AI model. According to Google, it's 1,000 times more capable than BERT. Haven't validated that, but it also can combine information from text, images, and video to help answer a query. And then in 2024, last year, May, they started to roll out AI overviews. So it's been over a year. I think I saw a stat, the prevalence of AI overview has more than doubled since last year. So it's still rolling out and expanding. The reason give that overview, people ask, what's the difference between SEO and AI optimization? There's a ton of overlap. And essentially, LLMs and the search algorithm are doing a lot of the same things, and they use a lot of the same technologies. And the way I was thinking about it, the difference is, say you have an old house. I live in an old house that's over 110 years old. And if I add solar panels, if I add a heat pump, update the electrical, versus someone who lives in a new house, it has a heat pump, it has solar panels, it has updated electrical. The difference is the new house was built entirely on new technology, so the walls are new, the foundation is new, maybe has better insulation and things like that. And so while Google's search algorithm has a lot of the new AI technology in it, it's based on this older model. And so the approach is just a little bit different, which is what we're going to get into, the differences between the two. But there's a ton of overlap. And I think the fact that LLMs were kind of built more recently, they don't have as much of the legacy stuff that you need to optimize for. So keywords still are important. I think the good news, before I dig into this, the good news is if you've been doing SEO, it's going to help you with AI because there is a ton of overlap. So keywords still matter. I think now it's like LLMs like natural language. They don't like keyword stuffing. So if you're still doing SEO like it's 2013, you're in trouble for sure. Page optimization. It's still important to optimize an entire page. But what's important for AI is what's like optimizing in chunks. So if you think of asking ChatGPT a question, it's going to pull from all over the internet to answer that question. Or same thing with Google AI overviews. It's going to pull from different sources. So the better you can like discreetly answer a question, the more likely it's going to pull from your website to answer that. Whereas if you are indirectly answering a question, say you use the entire page to come to your answer, they're less likely to use your content or to link to your web page because you're just not as directly answering the question. Link building. Link building is one of those things that was important to the legacy Google search algorithm. Now, a citation in AI speak is basically you're getting a link in their answer. So you want to have content that is something that they want to cite when they answer a user's question. Featured snippets. Featured snippets are basically dead. That was the thing it used to be position 0 in Google. You would Google something, you get the quick answer at the top, and then this rest of the organic results would be below that. Now, you want to really, again, directly be answering people's questions in your content. This is where like marketing fluff is bad because you're not speaking directly to the question. And keyword research still super important. But one thing that one way to look at queries is what's called query fan out. And I'm going to go into a lot of these examples here in a bit. So, you know, there's still a lot of relevant SEO practices that remain. High quality original content is super important. I emphasize original there because originality, there was a big Google algorithm leak last summer. And one of the things that came out in that leak of their search API was that originality is a ranking factor. So they actually score your content on how original it is. So if you're just taking content from all over the web and repackaging it as your own, you're going to have a bad originality score. That's also a factor with AI. So when you think about that, you know, what maybe you're writing a topic that a lot of people have written about. You want your approach to add something new. What's your fresh perspective on that topic? What's your primary research on that topic? Did you interview someone on that topic who gave, you know, a quote that isn't in all these other pieces about it? So that's something to keep in mind. Still relevant. Fast site speed, core web vitals. You know, that's still important for LLMs because they need to crawl and index your site, and they care if it's slow. It makes it harder for them to index. Structured data, so schema markup, important for SEO. Allegedly, according to everything we've done and seen in our research, it's more important for AI optimization. It's a little bit surprising to me. So structured data is, you know, say you're searching for recipes on the internet, and you see the Google preview of a recipe with the picture and the how long it takes to prepare and the calories. That's powered by structured data. Same thing with product reviews. So it's really common. You know, when we were talking internally about AI optimization a year ago, we didn't think structured data would be important because the way we were thinking about it, these LLMs are really advanced. They're smart. You know, they're scoring better than humans on all these tests. So why would they need structured data to help understand your content? Well, apparently they like it because it makes it easier for them. You know, if you're ingesting the entire internet into your model, anything you can do to make it easier for them to understand what something is, that's better. So I think that's a big takeaway is structured data was important for SEO. It's also important for AI. EAT signals. EAT is a really silly SEO lingo. It stands for expertise, experience, authority, and trust. It's really important in all industries, but especially in finance and health industries. So basically, how can you show that you're an expert? How can you convey trust? How can you convey authority? Really important when you're creating web pages for both SEO and LLMs. And then clear content structure and heading hierarchy. So, you know, content layout and formatting matters for SEO. It matters for AI. We're going to get into some examples of that. And then hub pages with topic clusters. So say you have a topic you really find it's really important for your business, having that core hub page and then the clusters around that page. That's good for both SEO and AI. So a lot of overlap between the two. But now we're going to get into some of the ways where you know, we can optimize for AI a little bit more specifically. So first, the technical stuff. And I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because they're, I think, a little bit boring. You know, most sites do these things, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. But the first one, indexability and rendering. So is important. You want to make sure that AI can index your website and see what's on there. Site speed, as I was saying a moment ago, and structured data. So a few specific rules for AI. Don't block robots. If you do, they can't access your site. So that's the same. If you're blocking robots, then Google can't either. So I would guess probably none of you are blocking robots, but just an FYI, if you want to show up in AI searches, you can't be blocking robots from your site. There's also a tag called a no snippet tag. It's actually specifically used to tell AI or Google AI overviews not to quote this. You can put it around a specific section on a web page. So if you want something to show up in an AI answer, don't use that tag. Another thing that's really common practice, but mentioning it, is using canonical tags. Canonical tags basically tell a bot, if say you have two similar versions of a page or two identical versions because of parameters or some other technical reason, it tells them this is the main version over here, and the duplicate version references the main version in the canonical tag. And another thing that's important too from a technical perspective is using internal links and descriptive anchor text. The internal links help them crawl to your site and understand the relationship between different pages and content. And the descriptive text also helps them understand the relationship between the two web pages that are linking to each other. Also, shout out for accessibility. Descriptive text is best practice for accessibility. So there are a lot of reasons to use descriptive anchor text, and avoid using things like learn more or read more and things like that. Structured data, as we were saying a minute ago, super important. So just have some examples of structured data here. So organization or local business schema is very basic. Most websites use it. Website, web page, breadcrumb schema, also very basic. Probably, most websites use that as well. Some less common ones, FAQ or Q&A schema. So if you have FAQs on a web page, you can mark those up in schema, and that tells the search engines and AI bots, here's a specific question, here's our specific answer, and that's shown to help your performance in AI search. Some other types of schema, so event schema, if you're running events, you can mark that up in schema. Product and product reviews, which they call aggregate rating. Service, so say you're a B2B company offering services, there are different types of service schema. Person, which could be an author, it could be an artist. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of types of schema. So, in this new world where it's becoming more important, researching what's a type of schema we could employ on our website. In this game of optimization, usually doing something going beyond what your competitors are doing always gives you a little bit of an advantage. So, your competitors are probably using organization or local business schema. So maybe you want to think about, which other types can we use for our business, whether you're in healthcare or, B2B or some other industry. Okay, so I think this is going to be the most interesting part of the discussion of the webinar today, is how to optimize your content. So the first thing I'm going to go into is the query fan out, which is what AI mode does when you search for something. And I think this is a technique that can help all of us understand how Google and probably other models think about this search that you're trying to show up for. We're going to talk about improving content structure, and then we're going to have 3 specific examples, how to optimize for chunk retrieval, answer synthesis, and citation worthiness. So what is query fan out? So this is a quote from Google. AI mode uses our query fan out technique, breaking down your question into subtopics and issuing a multitude of queries simultaneously on your behalf. Very impressive, right? And you'll notice, I use Claude. If you use ChatGPT or some other AI, if you do a web search, it will search multiple things subsequently to try to answer your question. And Google's AI mode is kind of doing the same thing. It's just doing a bunch of searches and showing them to you all at once. So I'm going to show another window here for a second. to go through these examples. So when you search for Manuel Antonio Costa Rica vacation, these different sub items here is an example of fan out. So it's looking for activities and adventure, nature and wildlife, other highlights, when to visit, tips for planning. So these would all, if you're doing keyword research, you could look at, Manuel Antonio wildlife, activities, things to do in Manuel Antonio. When should you visit Manuel Antonio? Google is just like doing all these searches in one swoop to answer the user's question. And so when you're thinking, I want to optimize our page around this, doing searches and seeing what's in the AI overviews is a good way to look at how Google's algorithm anyway for AI is, how they're thinking about what the related searches are, what are the different topics that people care about, and that could help inform your strategy for the page. I would always say, don't completely rely on that. Do your own research. Do what's right for your business. But this should be a pretty good input on, how do we want to optimize for this AI for Manuel Antonio? What kind of things should we talk about on the page? Another example here for Parkinson's disease. So you can see, just did just searching the disease name, and you can see it pulled in causes, it pulled in symptoms, pulled in progression, diagnosis, treatment, early signs, stages. So it's really covering the disease from every aspect. So if you're trying to rank for Parkinson's disease, you probably want to think about it a similar way. We've always preached this from an SEO perspective of, if you're going to cover a topic, what are the subtopics? What should you be hitting on? So if you have a hub page for Parkinson's disease, you should be thinking about, we want to have some cluster pages around each of these topics if you don't already, and then organize the page in a way that's logical. So this is an example. It's kind of think about this query fan out as a way, just almost like a research tool. So in practice, Google's just answering your question, but it does reveal a little bit about how their model works and how their model perceives queries. The next one I'm going to go into is content structure. So how do you structure your content is really important for AI. So in this document, and I'm going to take, this is a site that we optimize for SEO. So we're going to kind of critique our own work here. So this is a page that does really well in organic search, and we're going to critique it from an AI perspective. So we kind of have this before. We have, our headline with our second subheading, H2 here. So things to keep in mind is the heading structure, the content structure. So we have our H1, which is the page title. We have our H2, which is the most popular beaches. And then our H3 is a specific beach with a photo. And then we have a summary of the beach. And then a where to stay, which is like an example of an internal link. Then we have another beach, which is under our H2 of most popular. Same thing, description, internal link. Then we have another category of beaches. So best white sand beaches. This is another H2. Conchal Beach is an example, description. And then our last example here, Flamingo Beach, Guanacaste. So kind of similar pattern. So again, this is a really well organized page. It has good content structure already. As we think about optimizing for AI, we kind of have to take things a little bit further than that. So we created a version where we have basically the same content, and then broken down a little bit differently. So we have same H1, broke up the introduction into another subheading, and then kind of made these more distinct, smaller paragraphs. You can see the bolded text helps with, readability. Same H2 here, most popular beaches with the beach here. And then you can see shorten the description and then adding these sub-items. So when we talk about content structure, it really is literally the structure of the page, the content on the page. So what it does is it makes it easier to understand. So we have this like entry fee, when's the best time to visit, what are the facilities, what are the swimming conditions, and similar things for the different beaches. It doesn't need to be identical down the line, but making it easier for AI to ingest and understand what the content is about. And I think a good thing is too, it's probably a little bit better user experience. As you browse the web, you probably notice you're not reading super in depth. You're scanning, you're scrolling, especially when you're on your phone. And this sort of structure is great for AI optimization. It's honestly good for SEO, and it's probably a good user experience too. So sharing that example here is just overall thinking about content structure and organization when you're creating a page. The next example I'm going to get into, it's actually 3 examples. So how do we optimize for answers? How do we optimize for citation worthiness? And how do we optimize for authoritativeness? So first we have this, what is Parkinson's disease? These are just going to be snippets, not an entire page. So we have this, what is Parkinson's disease? Quick sentence and then a paragraph here. And then so it's not bad. It's answering the question, which is great. Here we added a lot more structure, made it easier to read. So if you look at this example, it has really long sentences. I mean, this sentence starts at it and goes all the way down here. So it's a really long sentence. So we want to break that up. Basically, just make it more legible and easy to read. So, the goal here is when you're optimizing for answers, AI is going to be more likely to grab something out of this content, put it in maybe a Google AI overview. The benefit there is, they're likely to then link to your website too. So that's kind of the goal of that, is getting more citations from the LLM. And these are all very similar things. So, they're just like a little bit different. So optimizing for citation worthiness, so getting them to cite you in their answer. So here we have some Parkinson's disease statistics that are on a web page. They're pretty good. They have links to some sources here. A lot of good statistics there. It's already in a bulleted list, which is good. So it's not a bad example by any means. So a way to think about improving that is breaking the bullets out into sub-lists, added a lot more links to the sources of these statistics, because this is a health space. So looking at that EAT factor, authoritativeness and trustworthiness is really important. So adding more citations is important. And then you'll also notice some of these statistics, they're all in the same bullet. So the average age of onset is 60, but 10% of diagnoses occur before age 50. Whereas down here, we just have average age of diagnosis as its own discrete statistic. And the young onset is its own statistic. That really helps the AI understand the different statistics individually, and users as well. If you're scanning the page, seeing one statistic per bullet is going to be a lot easier to understand. So again, this was a good example. It's just a way to push it a little bit further and improve your chances of being cited in an AI answer. The last one, authoritativeness, also important for SEO. Another one of those ones that's important for AI, maybe just to a little bit higher level. So we have this diagnosing for Parkinson's disease. And this is just a snippet on a page. This is not a full page. So we have this paragraph that talks about how Parkinson's disease is diagnosed, what the symptoms are. It's made by a neurologist. There's an image test called a DAT scan. And then there's a call out that there's some new tests coming out. And then there's a link to reading more about diagnosing. So in this version, adding this that it's been medically reviewed, which can add authoritativeness or trust as a user, having a shorter opening sentence, and then some key points about diagnosing. And then, it has a lot of the same information. There's no definitive test. Lower symptoms must be visible. It talks about the DAT scan. It talks about the future biomarker test. And then here we added a quote from the advisory board to add some more trust and authority to that. So it's really the same information, with the exception of the added quote and then the medically reviewed by. So you can see we're not drastically changing anything. We're just kind of moving things around and reformatting. And where we can, we're adding more links. In the last example, we're adding external links to scientific papers. It depends on the industry and the page you're optimizing. But for an article, something like that, an external link adds a lot of credibility and helps the model, understand that it's not just fluff, that you're not just making this statement without any facts to back it up. And, in the case of healthcare or finance, things where a lot of trust is required, having this has been reviewed by thing. Now, it wouldn't have to be in every snippet. This is just a snippet, but you can imagine putting that at the bottom of a page when the last time it was reviewed, which is similar on a standard article. Say you have a how-to post on something more benign, you could just say when the last time it was updated or reviewed. It sends a signal to the user and to the crawlers that you're updating your content, you're reviewing it. It's not just some stale piece of writing that's been sitting there. Okay, gonna go back to the presentation here. Okay, so we went through some examples on how to optimize for AI. Now we're going to get a little bit into how can you tell how you're doing? How are you performing? Are you showing up or not? So, a few different ways you can see how you're doing in both Google and LLMs. So you can look at your referral traffic in GA4. You can use SEO tools. A lot of SEO tools, like ranking tools, will show you if you're showing up in Google AI overviews or not, and which keywords have them. And you can monitor there are other tools you can use to monitor your visibility in AI. We have our own tool, but there are a lot of tools out there where you can do this sort of thing. So I'm going to show you some examples from each of those. So if you want to see your AI traffic in GA4, you can go to your acquisition report and look at referral traffic and then add source, and then you'll see in there ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini. From what we can see, ChatGPT is by far the biggest referrer, but Perplexity, refers quite a bit. Gemini is squarely in third, with Claude and Grok kind of, down at the bottom, 3 and 4. So that's a quick way. I can show you too in the browser that same thing. But another thing you might want to look at is, okay, so we're seeing how much traffic we're getting from these large language models. What content are they citing? So here's just the same thing. So looking at traffic from AI referrers, and then what page are people landing on? And I think this really struck me when I first started looking at this. For our site, our bread and butter on our blog has been like how to post, how to do something, how to do this in the analytics, how to do this in Google Tag Manager, how to do this thing in SEO or Google Ads. With AI, they're just going to answer that and not link. link out. But it seems like the more thought leadership posts are getting more traction. So you can see this top post, how AI overviews in AI mode affect Google Ads. That's getting the most traffic from AI. This other post about, this was a couple of years ago when generative search first came out and its effect on organic traffic. Again, it's not a standard like how-to post. So I think as you think about what do we write, what does AI want to see, that goes back to that originality sort of thing, something different is probably, so from what we've seen, tends to do better in AI than really quick how to do some XYZ thing or something that answers a question quickly. How do you perform in AI overviews? This is just a screenshot from a tool. Basically, you need to subscribe to some sort of ranking tool. Our tool we use, SEO Monitor, does this. You can see what keywords. So any keyword that has this little purple star next to it has an AI overview. When it's dark purple, you're showing up in it. So if you don't use a ranking tool, you really need to use one like SEMrush or Ahrefs, or there's a million of them. They all will show you kind of how you're doing in AI overviews, and that way you can get a sense for which ones are we in, which ones are we not in, and from there you can kind of create a strategy to make up for that gap. And the last thing is monitoring your visibility in LLMs. There's really no easy way to do this. Again, there are tools for this. We built our own. We basically take topics that a website would care to show up for, whether that's core to their business, and then think about the audience searching for that topic. What kind of prompt might they use? And then search that prompt or different variations of that thing, 4 to 5 to 6 different ways, and then see how often does the client show up, how often do competitors show up, and then kind of we're tracking those mentions and citations in there to kind of create this share of voice. So I actually can share this example with you in more detail. So you can see for pilot, we have this visibility tracker going. How are we doing over time? These mention wise, so you can see looking at Claude, OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity. So it looks like, doing the best for Claude, although it has less usage. Second best for ChatGPT, and then Gemini, and we're doing the worst for Perplexity here. And then share of voice would be what percentage of time you show up versus your competitors. So 29% of the time we're showing up on average for SEO. We have 18% of the share. So this is just a tool we built to monitor how we're doing for AI visibility. We can set that up for any client, any industry. And as I said, there are a lot of tools out there, but it really gives you a sense for how are you performing? How do you do in ChatGPT when if you're in healthcare and someone's looking for a specific treatment, or if you're a B2B company and they're looking for your services, how are you doing for that type of search? So if you don't know how you're doing, you have no idea. You can get a sense from your traffic in GA4, but you really won't know very well, which specific topics you're doing well for. So I think it's really important to start to get some visibility, especially as more people adopt AI use in their day-to-day life. Understanding how your visibility stacks up versus your competitors, I think, is going to be more and more important. And then ending on some tech to keep an eye on. The first one, Model Context Protocol, which is called MCP. If you use Claude or ChatGPT, you might have seen this already. It's basically a way for AI to connect to other things, whether that's a website or a database or GitHub or Gmail or your local file system on your computer. It's going to be more and more common, though, I think, as AI reaches more maturity. Um, you know, MCP could help you, keep an eye on your website security. It can, check your emails for you. I wouldn't recommend that, but it could. Um, it really, the difference between like using it and not using it, when you have MCP on your AI tool, it allows the AI to directly interact with that thing. So rather than asking a prompt and uploading a CSV file and having it do XYZ, it could actually go into your file system, find the file, and modify it for you. Use with caution. But as adoption expands, you could imagine, I'm sure some of you have heard about people talk about AI agents. Basically, MCP makes AI agents possible. So if you could set up MCP for your website and allow AI tools to interact with your website. Say you wanted to set it up for your shopping cart. So in a future world, say 2 years from now, it's 2027, you set up an MCP server for your shopping cart that would allow chat models to add things to the cart, check out, things like that. That technology is really going to be core to that, agentic AI future. And it can do a lot of cool things in the meantime. So definitely keep that on your radar. Another thing to keep an eye on is called NLWeb, and this one's really early stages, so it might not turn into anything, but I think pilot, we find it really interesting. It's invented by Microsoft. It's the same guy who invented RSS readers and actually schema structured data that we were talking about earlier. He came up with that language as well. What it does is it's an open source tool. Anyone can use it for free. It kind of ingests all your website data into a database, specific database type for AI called a vector database. So it takes all your information, puts it in a database, and then allows you to create a search or a chat feature that's powered by your website's data. And there are a lot of tools that can do this, but they're you have to build them yourself. This is a little bit easier and more out of the box. So it's kind of neat. So you could imagine replacing your search on your website with a search powered by NLWeb, or letting a user navigate your website that way. So early days, something to keep an eye on. It could be a way to help optimize your website for AI and things like that. As a bonus, when you set up NLWeb, it also sets up an MCP server for your website. So that last technology we were just talking about, by doing NLWeb, you can kind of have your own little MCP server running. And I put a link in here if you want to read more about either of these from Microsoft or from Anthropic. Okay, that's it. Questions? Time for questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat. There's one as of right now. KPI dashboards are a hot topic in my organization right now with the AIO shift from actually clicking into results to just impressions and all of the increases in AI referred traffic. Have you made any kind of KPI dashboards shifts to better capture the current state of SEO metrics? Do you recommend focusing more on AI source traffic? Or how are you telling the complete story in the dashboard format to folks who need a quick overview of SEO reporting data?
Wow, okay. Tough question because, Google doesn't give any data on AI overviews. Allegedly, they're going to add it to Search Console, like that specific, how now you can filter to image search versus web search versus, how you, they also have Merchant Center for e-commerce. They said months ago, I think 3 months ago, they were going to add AI overview data to Search Console. They have not yet. So it's basically a black box, which is unfortunate. So you can't really get any hard data from Google about AI overviews. And right now, that's probably the biggest source of your AI traffic. just because, there are billions and billions of Google searches, and there are millions and millions of AI searches. So, dashboarding that is hard. The other things, that's why we built that visibility tool. We wanted a dashboard to see what AI visibility was, to understand how are you doing, where are you doing well, where are you not doing well, because it's not going to be the same across the board for every topic. There's a lot of factors. So maybe in the future, Google will add that, and then, you can add it. You can pull it from Search Console. That would be great. Looking forward to that. I think they're just dragging their feet because they don't want people to see what the click-through rate numbers are, but eventually they'll probably have to add it.
Awesome. As of right now, that's the only question. Couple of housekeeping things. If anybody wants to add any more questions, we do have a few more minutes. So yes, if this has been recorded, we are going to send the link out for this, either by end of day today or early next week. So you can share it with other people in your org. And in the future, if you have any questions relating to Pilot and our AI services specifically, you can reach out directly to me. Yeah, I think I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. So Ben, you did an amazing job at explaining AI, so no one has any further questions.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending, and see some of y'all soon elsewhere.